everyone. Everybody get in here. Everybody get in here. Huge numbers, huge numbers. We're basically just doing this for the recording. So shout out to the playback crew for sure. For sure. But everybody, we've got some news in the Soulja Boy trial. I hope you've seen my article on my Substack. You guys should check it out. Let me link it here in the chat. But $4 million, about $4.2 million. And that's about $4 million in compensatory damages, they call, to compensate the plaintiff for what happened. And then there's another $250,000 in punitive damages against Soulja Boy to punish him for what happened. So we'll bring up the article here, let you guys check it out. And I'm going to have, he didn't try the case, but he's definitely involved in the case. He owns the law firm, the plaintiff's law firm that filed suit. So, and I think he technically represents the woman. He was in the courtroom for some of the testimony, some of the trial too. Neama. So he's gonna be here in a couple minutes here, but we'll talk to him. He was there for the verdict too. We was able to have a good discussion with him about the case. He has other lawsuits too against other celebrities. His firm represents Emilio Garcia in that lawsuit against Meghann Thee Stallion. They represent Lizzo's former employees in the sex harassment case that's actually under appeal to the California Court of Appeals right now, but we'll be able to ask him about that. But and they also represent another woman who's suing Soulja Boy and is supposed to go to trial. I'm not quite sure when, but that case is pending. So they were obviously satisfied with the verdict. I think they were hoping for a lot more in punitive damages, and in compensatory damages they actually asked for $73.5 million. So I don't know if they actually expected to get that much, but I think it's always I think as Neama told me yesterday, you can't get what you don't ask for. So I think to ask for 73 and get 4 million, that doesn't mean that it's a huge disappointment to them. I think the 4 million is good for them. So it was a 3-week trial. We did I did some talks about it earlier in the week, but Soulja Boy was there for pretty much every day of it. And I think he was in the courtroom for every day of it. As a civil case, he's not technically required to be there, but he was, and he testified too. We heard from the woman, we heard from him. And then actually I got a video of him talking afterward that I'll share it here.
Delivered in my case. I firmly believe that the decision made in court was not based on...
Think about the verdict.
Today, I stand before you deeply disappointed in the verdict delivered in my case. I firmly believe that the decision made in court was not based on facts or substantial evidence, but rather on factors that were outside of my control. The truth was overshadowed by the involvement of individuals such as the jury who were not present during the events in question. And I feel that the system allowed external influences to shape the outcome. Furthermore, the use of Jane Doe as the identity of the accusers raises serious concerns about fairness. Keeping these individuals anonymous while I'm forced to face public scrutiny creates an unequal playing field. I believe this entire process has been tainted by a system that is not designed to protect the rights of the accused. I want to make it clear that I'm innocent. This case was never about justice. It was about money and personal gain, and I would not let that stand. I am committed to filing an appeal and fighting for the truth to be revealed. I will continue to stand by my decision and believe that I did not commit the crimes I'm accused of. Thank you to everyone who has supported me during this time. I promise that I will fight until the end to clear my name and expose the truth. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Would you mind repeating the first 3 sentences?
Another reporter, he walked up.
Disappointed in the verdict delivered in my case. I firmly believe that the decision made in court was not based on facts or substantial evidence, but rather on factors that were outside of my control. The truth was overshadowed by the involvement of individuals such as the jury who were not present during the events in question. and I feel like the system allowed external influence to shape the outcome.
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, and then he went back in for, and that was before the punitive phase too. So really, the punitive damages phase was probably a win for him because after the $4 million compensatory verdict, the woman's lawyers had asked for $4 million in punitive damages, and actually, the attorneys, when I talked to them before that, they were predicting that they'd get a pretty substantial punitive award here. And Soulja's lawyer, in his closing argument in the punitive page, made the point that the $4 million was already sending a message to him, and that they didn't need to impose any more punitive damages. That the $4 million in punitive, if they doubled the verdict to $8 million, they said that would send Soulja into bankruptcy, and talked about how he has other obligations, and that this case is already affecting him financially. And the plaintiff side of it, they questioned Soulja for like maybe 30 minutes about his assets. But of course he can just do the whole, I don't remember, I don't know for sure, I don't know for sure. So we really didn't get any information about his assets at all. And at least the juror that talked to a couple of reporters afterwards said that they thought his lawyer in the punitive phase did a good job of highlighting his other financial obligations. But so 10 of the jurors wanted 250,000, one wanted $1 million, one wanted 100,000, and they don't have to be unanimous. So it was 250,000. But I see we have the owner of the plaintiff's firm that brought the case. He can tell us all about this. You guys probably see him on TV a lot. He makes a lot of rounds. He was able to fit me in on this, so I appreciate it. But Neama, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Good, Meghann. Thank you for having me. Glad to be on. I know you have spent a lot of time in that courtroom, so yes. I appreciate all your efforts to cover the case.
Yeah, it was an interesting case for sure. Good verdict. I mean, I know you were hoping for more in punitive damages, but overall, what can you say about the verdict and this win for your firm?
Well, it's certainly a win when you have a defendant who's calling your client a lying, disgruntled ex. So, the offer before trial was $100,000. So when you get a $4.25+ million verdict on an offer like that, that's fantastic. When you have your client vindicated and the jury says that she was sexually abused and she was physically assaulted and she didn't make all this up, that's certainly a win. Obviously, you can kind of look at the previous case that Kayla Myers brought, and that was, the judgment in that case was approximately 10% of what we got. So, if you look at all those different factors, this was definitely a win for Jane Doe. Obviously, we want more. We always want more. But, we'll certainly take this and a win. And we're going to move forward with the second Jane Doe lawsuit, which was actually consolidated with this case at the 11th hour. They filed a motion of severance. Judge Epstein granted it, but we were supposed to have two Jane Does in one lawsuit. But we'll get to have another trial, which I'm sure Meghann's going to cover as well.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that. So you said their offer before trial was 100,000. Did you have an offer on your side? Was there a number that you were looking for them to offer to settle?
Well, we did. We made an offer to compromise in 998 in the 2 million range, and we between 2 and 3 million, we beat that as well. So because there was an offer to compromise that we beat by almost 2x, they're gonna have to pay for our costs. And then, of course, under California law, whenever there's a FEHA claim, sexual harassment, there's wage claims, we also get our attorney fees as well. So when you add all that up, the costs, the interest, prejudgment, the attorney fees, looking at potentially, $1, $2, $3 million on top of that judgment as well. So.
Now, you may have seen Soulja Boy's comments about how he's vowing to appeal, and I know you probably expect an appeal in this case, but can you talk about what you think the issues would be and if there's any merit or possibility of something happening on appeal?
People can always appeal. That's their absolute right. I don't see any appellate issues. I mean, you were in court. I think the judge called it very, very fair. There was nothing that really came in in terms of evidence that was improper from our perspective. Really, this is a case that came down to likability and credibility, which Meghann, a lot of cases come down to, right? I mean, there's so many cases. You can say Johnny Depp won, as soon as he took the stand, and Amber Heard took the stand. ASAP Rocky case, right? The victim was not likable, not credible. We all knew watching what was going to happen in both of those cases, right? One civil, one criminal. And in this case, you have the Soulja Boy in court was very different from the Soulja Boy in deposition, right? That's why folks that are watching, if you're lawyers, you can learn a thing or two, videotape those depositions in important cases, because you can really use that at trial. And I think he was really impeached in terms of wearing fake glasses, taking the acting lessons. I don't think that the jurors really found him credible. And when you have a Jane Doe who's telling a very personal story and being vulnerable about how she was physically and sexually abused, she's crying on the witness stand, she's crying when doctors and mental health professionals, and even during my colleague Ron Zambrano's closing argument, where he's talking about how she's beaten, punched, kicked, cut. I think that's what the jurors saw, and I think that's why they returned the verdict that they did.
But it seems like the corroborating evidence that they had, like the text messages, at least from the discussion, the limited discussions I had with the jurors, it seemed like that played a role there in corroborating her testimony, making it like more than just a popularity contest, but they thought that there was actual evidence supporting her case. I mean, do you guys look for stuff like that when you're interviewing possible clients and trying to decide whether to file a lawsuit? I mean, you need more than testimony.
Of course, because like you said, if it's just a he said, she said type situation, oftentimes that's very difficult for jurors to side with the plaintiff, even though the jury instruction says that if you believe the testimony of the victim, or any witness for that matter, you can determine that fact was proven. But there are a lot of jurors out there that won't believe just the testimony of the victim. So obviously, you've covered a lot of cases. We sue a lot of celebrities, and jurors love celebrities. So if someone is coming to our office, and we've sued Kanye, Lizzo, Jason Derulo, Takeoff, Megan Thee Stallion. I mean, you've covered all these cases, not just the Soulja Boy cases. What I asked, obviously, I get to the client's story, but there's two things that I spend time talking to clients about. What corroborating evidence do you have? Did you tell law enforcement? Did you tell a doctor? Did you even tell a friend or family member? And this is why. Even though the conversations with loved ones might be hearsay under the rules of evidence, if the defense argues that this is all fabricated, those prior consistent statements can come in under the rules of evidence. So I always ask, is there anything that can corroborate what you're saying? Not to say I don't believe you, but it's not what I know as a lawyer. It's what I can prove. So I spend time talking to the client about that corroborating evidence. In this particular case, we had a treasure trove of text message evidence, right? We had the pictures of the bruising. And I don't think the defense had a good explanation for all that. So that's one. The second thing I do, Meghann, is I prepare them for the very real possibility that their case will go all the way to trial, because they'll be called a liar. They'll be called a jealous ex. They'll, the defense, and even people that are watching on social media, they'll say this is all about money. This is a shakedown. This is extortion. So I ask them honestly, are you willing to take this case the whole way? Because if you're not, these aren't the types of cases that are going to settle with a demand letter. It's not a car accident or a slip and fall. So I prepare clients for that possibility, because if you're not willing to go the whole way in a case like this, then there's a very good chance that the defense will play that game of chicken, push the case up to the brink of trial, hoping that you'll drop it or you won't show up.
In terms of likability of who's testifying, and I mean, I think it's clear that obviously the jury preferred the woman's testimony, and one of the female juror I talked to said that they thought Soulja Boy was lying on the stand about a few things. But then there was the older man who seemed to at least credit him a little bit with mitigating the huge damages. He said the idea that there was a debate in the jury room about whether she was really a true victim or whether she was part of this entourage lifestyle. So is that a credit to his testimony at all? Or is that just part of the case, just kind of the facts of the case, because your colleagues did a good job of basically just acknowledging that this wasn't just a clear-cut case, that she had acknowledged some of the things that she had done too, but that there was no accountability from him.
I think you have to, so when we went into the trial and even during our jury selection, we made it clear that this is a victim, but she chose to stay with her abuser. And some folks, especially people that, don't understand the psychology of abuse, sometimes maybe older jurors, they say, well, you're being abused. If you're being beaten and raped, why do you choose to stay with him? Why do you send messages to him saying that you love him? So that's why I think it was important to talk to the jurors about that very real fact, potentially negative fact that could have hurt us. So I think, like you said, the reality is jurors love celebrities, and especially in LA County. So when you take a case against a celebrity, you have to know that the deck may be stacked against you, and people may have some preconceived notions about how victims should act. And when they don't leave, they don't report right away. And look, I dealt with this all the time, not just as a plaintiff's lawyer now, but I was a prosecutor for many, many years. I prosecuted domestic violence cases. I know the psychology of abuse and how victims, oftentimes they don't leave, they return to their abusive partner. So this is something I think it was important to front for the jury. And like you said, Meghann, I think the problem with the defense is they took no accountability for anything. They denied everything. None of this ever happened. We don't know where the bruising came from. When I said, I hate you, I hope you die, and, I'm threatening your family, I didn't mean any of that. Well, that's not reasonable. So, I mean, jurors, they're not stupid. And I think they realized that when they went into that deliberation room.
So where are you at with the other case, the one that got severed? Do you have any kind of timeline on a trial date on that? I think we talked about that, but for the benefit.
Well, we're hoping to go to trial as quickly as possible. Obviously, we're hoping that the cases would be tried together because it would be a much stronger case when there's two victims telling the same story of physical and sexual violence. The defense filed that severance motion. It was granted. Now, I understand why the judge granted it. It would have been an appellate issue, right, which we avoided now. But now there's going to be a whole nother jury that's going to have to hear a whole nother case of very similar abuse allegations. But look, maybe Soulja Boy's learned his lesson, and maybe he's going to make a real offer in the seven figures, and our client's going to have to consider it. But if it's going to be another lowball $100,000 offer, I can tell you right now, just like I would tell his lawyers, that's a non-starter, not something we're going to consider.
Yeah. So you have, we were talking yesterday that you hope this is a wake-up call to the industry, that you have other employment-related cases like this that are, really unusual and kind of outside the box employment cases in terms of wage losses and that kind of thing, just because of celebrities and the agreements that they have. Can you talk about the Lizzo case and where we're at with that? I know that was most of that was dismissed under anti-SLAPP, but that's under appeal, and you seem pretty confident that you're going to have some success at the appellate court.
I think so. I think some of it was dismissed, but I think our core claims are still there. Lizzo's basically the entity is still there as well. So even if she's out, the entity is going to be responsible. So I feel confident about the case. It happens to be before the same judge. So, we like Judge Epstein, and he also happens to have the Jay-Z extortion case. I don't know if he's, the musician judge in LA County. It's good luck or bad luck, but I think he is a very fair judge. I like his temperament. I like being in his courtroom. So we're excited to present the Lizzo case. And, one thing about us is we're sort of unique in that we're a personal injury and employment firm. So you saw in, this Jane Doe case, we had employment claims with our best employment lawyer, Ron Zambrano there, but we also have my partner, Dina Inechi, who's a personal injury lawyer. And, we'll take these cases, these crossover cases, because we have the capability to handle them. And I do think we are seeing a bit of a change. The music industry has been late to the game, but you and I talked after this verdict. And obviously Diddy is by far the biggest and most serious of the musician cases. But look, there's a lot of others, we've talked about all these different musicians who we believe take advantage of people around them, whether it's members of their entourage, their employees, their intimate partners. And just because you're a rich and famous celebrity in the music industry doesn't mean that you can violate the law. So we've carved out a niche practice in doing this, and we're happy to represent these victims. And Soulja Boy, I expect to just be the first of many of these types of defendants that are going to be hit with judgments, and some of them may ultimately be prosecuted as well.
And this might just be the start of a long process in collecting money from him, right? Because I've seen a lot of questions about, well, he doesn't have $4 million. What are you going to do for that? And you talked yesterday about the process, the 10 years that you have to collect on this judgment, and then you can renew that for another 10 years. Are there different things you can do to try to get some money for the plaintiff?
That's the plan, to whether it's to, go after his music royalties or garnish any wages that he may have, whatever's getting paid on tour. If he has any real property, we can attach that and sell that. So there's certain things that we can do to enforce the judgment, and we have plenty of time to do so. Now, of course, there may be some post-verdict settlement where he pays a significant sum of money and this gets resolved and it goes away. That's always a possibility. But, other plaintiffs' lawyers have contacted me in the past 24 hours. Like, wow, this is great, but there's no insurance money here. Why did you take this case? I'm like, well, we took it because it was a righteous case. It's not all about the money, even if at the end of the day, we don't get $1 out of this. And I expect that we will, and we'll make sure that we go to the ends of the earth to get our client paid. But even if we don't, that's why you go to law school and you become a lawyer. It's not just about dollars and cents. This is why I was a prosecutor for many years. I absolutely loved it because I like going after the bad guy or girl. And if I get paid, great. But if not, and I can vindicate my client and she can tell her story and I can dramatically change her life because she's now free from her abuser. You know what? When I put my head on the pillow at night, I know I did the right thing. And frankly, that's why, Meghann, I'm one of the few prosecutors out there that doesn't do any criminal defense work. I don't defend criminals. I don't defend companies. I only represent victims. And that's why I chose to do this.
And I know you were at the U.S. Attorney's Office in L.A. for a few years. Were you at the LADA's office before that, or where?
So I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was actually in the Southern District, so I was in San Diego. I was with the LA City. I was at the Ethics Commission. I ran the enforcement division there, so they oversee all the elected officials. So there, I was doing government ethics, public corruption, campaign finance law. I oversaw Gruhl versus Garcetti's election, so I did that. I'm going to be candid. The plan all along was to become a judge. And then my wife and I, we had 2 kids, and she's a lawyer. She's minors counsel in dependency court. She represents foster kids. So when my wife and I had 2 kids of our own and we were both working for the government, we couldn't afford to both work in the public sector, either on the bench or being a prosecutor. So that's why I opened West Coast Trial Lawyers approximately 10 years ago, because I had to return to the private sector, but I didn't want to do any defense work. So that's the happy medium I'm in, where I'm representing causes and cases I believe in, but also getting paid.
Yeah. So sorry, were you a prosecutor in San Diego County, or was it just U.S. Attorney's Office?
Yeah, U.S. Attorney's Office in San Diego, so in the Southern District, and there I was primarily doing drug and human trafficking. So that's really where I cut my teeth. Before that, I started as a deputy city prosecutor through their TAP program. I started prosecuting cases in Hermosa, Redondo Beach, DUIs, bar fights. That's where I really started being a prosecutor. Wow.
Is that where you did the domestic violence cases? Because they wouldn't have many of those.
Yes. So I did a lot of DV cases there. Exactly.
Nice.
I did DV, I did sexual assault, even did some child porn, state stuff. Then obviously went federal.
Yeah. How many years has West Coast Trial Lawyers been along? You guys
started, in 2014. So it's been about 11 years. We've grown to about 25 lawyers and about 200 staff. So we're one of the bigger plaintiffs firms in the state now.
Yeah. And it seems like you always have, splashy lawsuits when they land with celebrities. I mean, I've said that, especially the PR and the Lizzo lawsuit has got to be seen as like just the ultimate success story, because you guys were everywhere when that was filed. But what are your other high profile cases right now other than Soulja Boy?
Lizzo's the biggest. We have a lot of the Kanye cases, probably half of them. Those 2 are some of the bigger ones. I mean, obviously, you've covered, Megan Thee Stallion and,
Yeah.
some of these other cases. But right now, some of it is the client, but oftentimes when you're dealing with celebrities, it really is the defendant, right? So,
Yeah.
And Kanye, just because of who he is and what he does, even though he's sued all the time, is always in the news. And Lizzo, um, for better or worse, setting aside our lawsuit, there are just some people that just do not like her and have sort of taken, advantage of our lawsuit, which is, unique to just basically tear her down. Obviously, we completely disagree with how she treated her employees and her dancers and the statements she's made in the media, shaming them and calling them liars. But, we don't like to go after people or bully people. And I think some of people that don't like Lizzo, Megan, have sort of taken our lawsuit and run with it. But like you said, on the PR side of things, because again, I'm one of the few prosecutors that doesn't do defense work. I'm often brought on TV to give the prosecution perspective, right? Because there's plenty of criminal defense lawyers that will do so. So whether it's something true crime, Menendez, Brian Koberger, Luigi Mangione, I ended up being a talking head on a lot of these cases, not because I'm doing criminal work right now, but because I'm explaining the prosecution perspective on those cases as a prosecutor.
Oh, one thing I wanted to ask about, when I was Googling the Lizzo stuff, I saw that there was a federal lawsuit that had been dismissed. What was that? What was that in relation to the state lawsuit? Were those separate?
Yeah, it was because there was diversity jurisdiction. The case was removed to federal court, and under federal law, there are fewer protections for employees. So because those protections didn't apply in that case was dismissed. Okay. But the vast majority of the Lizzo claims are there. There's certainly more than enough to push the case to trial, as you saw in the Jane Doe case, where even shortly before the verdict, we ended up dismissing certain causes of action like negligence. Oftentimes, as plaintiff lawyers, we sort of take a little bit of a kitchen sink approach. We throw everything out there. The defense files their motions to dismiss and summary judgment. They're billing hourly, so they get paid to do all this and file. But as long as your core claims are there, you can go to trial, and you don't need every single cause of action to survive.
Yeah. Well, great. What else should we know about the firm going forward? Any other cases we should be looking forward to, or?
I think those are the bigger ones. Obviously, we represent all sorts of people. Terrible things have happened to them. People have died. They've been paralyzed. Those tend to not make the headlines because they're not celebrity cases. But we have thousands and thousands of cases, and we're helping ordinary people who are suing just corporations, right? And my general sort of takeaway, and you do such an amazing job, Megan, of really educating the public. I think what we want to do is, whether it's a celebrity case, whether it's a true crime case, whether it's politics, right? I'll talk about Trump, Biden, whatever it is. I think it's important for people to know their rights and to understand the law. And that's something that, we try to do, whether it's a video like this or a TikTok or an Instagram reel. So what my recommendation is, if you have a legal question, call our firm. We'll try to help you out. And if not, we'll point you in the right direction. So
absolutely. Oh, one thing I wanted to ask, the Diddy lawsuits, have you been approached by any possible clients on that? Or are you looking to get into any litigation on that? It seems like the kind of cases that your firm would take on, but there's obviously a lot of other lawyers doing this.
Oh, we have been approached by the Diddy clients. We have not retained any of them for a number of reasons during our vetting process. And, even though I'm licensed in California, Nevada, Arizona, Washington State, as West Coast trialers, we tend to stick on the West Coast. And most of those cases are filed in New York because New York State, then New York City opened the statute of limitations there. So we haven't found a viable, in our opinion, Diddy case in the areas that we practice laws, which is why we haven't taken on those cases.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I imagine next month you'll be busy with the trial talk on that. My impression is that's definitely going to trial next month, right? I mean, are you expecting any kind of last minute delays or?
100% it's going to trial, Meghann. May 5th, it's going to start. Look, when the government supersedes a third time a month before trial and the defense doesn't ask for a continuance, because we know the judge would grant a continuance, that's a very late superseding indictment. We know that Diddy wants to go to trial. And the reason he wants to go to trial is because he's in custody and he thought he was going to be out by Christmas. So he's pushing this case to trial one way or another, and it's the defendant's right to a speedy trial. So if he doesn't waive that right, the government's got to be ready to go.
What do you think the chances of an acquittal are? I mean, it's hard to say with, we know the Cassie video, but other than that, we haven't seen too much evidence. But, are they reaching with a conspiracy case here? If it was just a domestic violence, it'd be screwed.
I think it's very likely he's going to be convicted. Maybe because I'm a former Fed and we're talking about the Southern District of New York. They're really the best of the best there. But one of the reasons is that video evidence. Obviously we've seen the evidence from the Intercontinental Hotel here in Los Angeles, right? CNN got it in May. And the reason that's so powerful, let's not forget, when Cassie first filed a lawsuit, Diddy came out, publicly denied it. Even after he settled the lawsuit the next day, he said the allegations were completely unfounded. After his homes were raided in March of last year in LA and Miami, Diddy said, this is all built on lies. Only after that video was released did Diddy finally issue that apology on social media. I didn't think it was heartfelt at all, but that shows how powerful the video is. And I expect there to be video evidence of these freak-offs, Meghann. And I think that's going to be introduced in court. And that's why I believe Diddy will be convicted, because people can lie, but video doesn't lie.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You do a lot of cases that are on my radar, so hopefully we'll check in later on. But
I'm sure we will, Meghann. Great seeing you and talking to you as always. Have a great weekend.
See you. Thank you.
Bye.
Right. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and shout out to the playback crew. We'll get some video clips up on here later on, and thank you all so much. If we'll keep the interviews up and keep the articles up. But again, if you guys haven't seen my story, it's on legalaffairsandtrials.com here. My Substack, subscribe to my Substack, and you guys can get this in your inbox with everything in it. But again, we've got and then I just posted this, the video of Soulja responding to everything on my socials. So you guys can check that out. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Well, here I'll for the people who haven't seen it, I'll play his response. He typed it out on his phone or did a GPS or a chat GT or something. But think about the verdict.
Today, I stand before you deeply disappointed in the verdict delivered in my case. I firmly believe that the decision made in court was not based on facts or substantial evidence, but rather on factors that were outside of my control. The truth was overshadowed by the involvement of individuals such as the jury who were not present during the events in question. And I feel that the system allowed external influences to shape the outcome. Furthermore, the use of Jane Doe as the identity of the accusers raises serious concerns about fairness. Keeping these individuals anonymous while I'm forced to face public scrutiny creates an unequal playing field. I believe this entire process has been tainted by a system that is not designed to protect the rights of the accused. I want to make it clear that I'm innocent. This case was never about justice. It was about money and personal gain. And I will not let that stand. I am committed to filing an appeal and fighting for the truth to be revealed. I will continue to stand by my decision and believe that I did not commit the crimes I'm accused of. Thank you to everyone who has supported me during this time. I promise that I will fight until the end to clear my name and expose the truth. Thank you.
Yeah, so there we have it. And thank you. I just saw your guys' messages. Thank you, Toria. I appreciate your kind words. And gonna try to get back into the YouTube grind. They've been hurting me on the algorithm, but I'll get back into it. So thanks so much, you guys. I'll talk to you all later.